It's even worse. I mean, I did some very heated bargains in Karachi, Pakistan. We went there in 1999 for a business trip, and my boss's wife told me, "You're gonna buy your wife some pashmina. These are stuff that is made from the hair of a certain goat that only grows up in mountains of Kashmir, and it's about here. Depending upon the quality, it's so fine. You can get a whole scarf and pass it through a ring. And they were very expensive in Turkey, even medium quality, 500 bucks. I go there and I buy. I my boss's wife was there. I have no idea what things are. She says, buy that, buy that, buy that. Buy one for your sister, your mother, and some other stuff. And we had a Pakistani guy. This kid bargained, and he came up. He says, "Okay." He says, $400. And I look at it. If I bought those in Istanbul, it probably would have been at least 2,000. And I took two Benjamins out of my pocket, and I said, "Here's 200 bucks. You got 5 minutes." Of course, he started saying, "Oh, my kids are gonna starve." That's common everywhere. You're gonna hear exactly the same thing in Istanbul, just in a different language. Do you know that it comes to me at 300? That means if you come down to 300, I'll accept it. So you have to go below that. And I left after 5 minutes, and he sends the kid after me. He says, "Okay, all right." I digressed. We're gonna list. Uh, we're gonna first define current assets. These are assets that could be expected to convert to cash, and we use the term cash loosely. I'm not talking about paper currency. The money that I have in my checking account is cash. Convert to cash within a year or an accounting cycle. I don't think that's much of an issue these days, but in the old days, certain companies had accounting cycles that were longer than a year because of the nature of the products they do. But these days, you can take it as 1 year. And even under current assets, we do not list the current assets willy-nilly. We list them in the decreasing order of liquidity. Of course, cash and cash equivalents, the most liquid asset of them all. They're followed by generically short-term investments. In many cases, you don't put your money to bank, even into a savings account or interest-bearing checking account, and get only 3% out of it. Well, if you put it to short-term treasuries, you can get 5. Maybe a little bit of investment-grade corporate paper, maybe you can get 7. Those are all short-term investments. The investments that are expected to be uh, repaid within a year, or sometimes these could be investments into stocks. So if the company bought 1,000 shares of Google or 1,000 shares of NVIDIA, that's $100,000. That's a short-term investment. If the company owns 10% of NVIDIA, that is not a short-term investment. That is a long-term asset. Okay. And in the old days, we only looked at cash and cash equivalents. But these days, to figure out how much very quick cash company can get their hands on, we actually look at these two. Let's look at, uh, since I already have it here, NVIDIA balance sheet. I'm going to look at the quarterly. So the last, in fact, in NVIDIA's case, uh, financial quarter ends at the end of January. So second quarter ended at the end of July. Out of total assets, current assets, we have cash and cash equivalents, $34.8 billion. Well, just 2 years ago, they had only 18. Of that, 8.5 is cash and cash equivalents. The others are other short-term investments. So that's why they're, you know, even if T-bills, they can get probably 5% these days. Let me see. It's, yeah, the 3-month T-bill is 5.09. 1 month is 5.21. In about 2, 3 weeks, that's going to go down because Fed is expected to reduce the short-term interest rates. But I'm NVIDIA and I'm keeping that cash for reasons that may not be related to my business. I need to put it somewhere. The cash in the bank is not going to give you same kind of returns. Then we're going to list accounts receivable. These are sales you made, but you have not received payment yet. That doesn't mean we don't recognize them as sales, because in modern accounting, we do accrual accounting. As soon as the sales is made, the value from the sale is ascertained and the goods are shipped to the customer. We call that a sale. Whether you get the money in 2 days or 2 years, that doesn't matter. That is still a sale. But if you have and sales that are not paid yet, they are called receivables. And receivables that are due within a year are called accounts receivable. The receivables that are due more than a year, which is relatively rare these days, are called notes receivable, and they tend to carry an interest. Accounts receivable don't. It's in many cases, if you allow your clients to pay on trade credit, you tend to charge them a little bit higher. Anybody that pays up front, you can give them discounts. But companies like financing, if I'm one of those NVIDIA's customers, let's say I'm a wholesaler of these chips, I'm going to buy them, and within 90 days, I expect to sell them to my clients. Normally, I need to finance that from the bank, and I would pay an interest to the bank. I say to NVIDIA, I'm good for it. About 90-day trade credit. As soon as I sell, I'm going to pay you back. It's like selling stuff on consignment. They are not expected to be as liquid as short-term investments. Again, that also varies from firm to firm. One of the reasons we don't consider accounts receivable that liquid, A, it's going to take a while for you to get the money because these things have a certain maturity to it. Some of them are 30 days, some of them are 90 days. It's rare that you get 6 months, but it could happen. And B, it is not certain that they will be able to pay. They may be willing to pay, but willing to do something and being able to do something are two different things. Back in mid-90s, that's why we never rely. I worked as a research assistant, and I also did some of my own research in the financial shenanigans in Japan in '90s. You looked at the balance sheet, man, that's on balance sheet. These companies looks perfect. But you also look at from 1989 to 1996, company lost 95% of its value without necessarily decline in sales or anything. Of course, they were lying. And Japanese culture is a little bit different. Japanese have a term for foreigners. It's somewhat pejorative. It's called Gaijin. You never admit to Gaijin what's wrong with you. You only admit to people that are your of clan. And the way corporations are structured in Japan, they have these industrial groupings. They're called the Keiretsu. Before the Second World War, they were called the Zaibatsu. And if a company in a certain Zaibatsu or Keiretsu was in trouble, you will never know it if you're outside of them. They just don't admit failure. Remember the Japanese culture. Even though the last seppuku was done in 1961, I think, at least that we know of, when a samurai cannot do his job and his lord is murdered, he is expected to commit seppuku, which is a ceremonial suicide. You take your very short sword, it's called the tanto. A samurai carries three swords. One is the long one, katana. The other is the wakizashi. If you're an experienced samurai, you can basically use in one hand, the other in the other hand. Katana is to slash, wakizashi is to stab. Tanto, it is considered dishonorable to use in battle. Its only purpose is if you have to commit seppuku, you open your guts and you give your katana to your second. And as soon as the guts are open,